As we see it right now, entering spring, of course, this is subject to change. Some of the toughest schedules in the SEC are Oklahoma. We got Oklahoma, Florida, Arkansas, Alabama. Like those are the four toughest schedules by our formula in the conference this year. To give you an idea, like if I were to go down some losers, some teams that lost when it comes to the schedule maker in the SEC, Florida is certainly one of them. They got the number 2 toughest schedule based on our system, but Miami and Florida State are total wild cards here. So you're listening to this and saying, well, they're not in the SEC. What does that have to do with anything? They're not. But Florida plays both of them. So we would quantify those as either Tier 1 or Tier 2 opponents. But as you well know, Florida State could be hot garbage this year or win 11 games. What caliber of opponent are they going to be? They're all the way down here at the end of the season, too, so we don't know. So that's one wild card baked into Florida's schedule. The other one is they play at Miami in Week 4. No one knows what Miami's going to be. So those are 2 wild cards. Outside of that, Florida's got a couple of back-to-back road spots, LSU, Miami, and then later on in the season, Kentucky, Ole Miss. And really, those are 3 games in a row that are away from home. They go to Jacksonville, then they go to Lexington, then they go to Oxford. At LSU, Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, got Miami, got A&M, Ole Miss. It's just a tough schedule. And wait till you see how this compares to some of the lighter schedules in the conference. Oklahoma, I think, may have the toughest schedule. I know I just showed you our numbers, and if I didn't know our numbers, I would just look at Oklahoma's schedule and I would say, this is brutality. They have 9 games against Tier 1 or Tier 2 opponents, as we would define them. That's the most in college football. No one has a tougher schedule than Oklahoma, to me, this year in college football. Now, they've got 3 very soft games. So Kent State, they go to Temple somehow. They play Illinois State. Because they have those on there, someone's going to pick and choose and decide to make fun of that. Yeah, you could throw a couple of more high school teams on there for all I care. They've got Michigan out of conference. They play this stretch where they have Texas and South Carolina and Ole Miss and Tennessee and Bama. Only one of those games is in Norman. And even if they were all there, they'd still be tough. They end the season. Look at how they end the season. Just listen to this if you're listening on pod. Texas in Dallas, at South Carolina, Ole Miss, at Tennessee, at Alabama, Missouri, LSU. Boom. It's just body blow after body blow after body blow. Alabama doesn't have an easy schedule this year. And they've got a couple out-of-conference opponents that are wild cards. They play at Florida State to start the season. It's not a neutral site game. They play at Florida State. Florida State, I think, debuting the brand-new stadium renovations and whatnot, whatever that means in a point spread. Probably a solid quarter of a point there, the old Doak bump. But they also play Wisconsin at home. So a very legitimate out-of-conference schedule for Alabama. They play 3 games versus Tier 1 teams. They play 3 more versus Tier 2 teams. And 4 of the 5 versus those Tier 2 teams are on the road. Excuse me, I should have said that. They play 5 Tier 2 teams, and 4 of those 5 games are on the road. They also go to Georgia this year. There is no spot on Alabama's schedule where they have a big bye advantage or a disproportionate rest advantage. The rest disadvantage is actually against them. They go to Missouri in week 6 or 7, and Missouri's off a bye. So Bama's got a pretty tough schedule this year as well. Now, if you flip it and you talk about some of the easier schedules in the SEC, hey, quick timeout. Check and see if you're subscribed to the channel. If you're not, make sure you do. It's free. It doesn't obligate you or sign you up for anything. It just helps us keep the channel free. All right, back to the show. Think about how different this is. There's such a vast canyon between the Floridas and Oklahomas of the world and some of these teams that have the easier schedules this year. Texas A&M and LSU and Georgia, yeah, they're like 9, 10, 11. Tennessee, to me, has the most workable schedule of any team in this conference this year. And here's what's wild. They play Georgia and Alabama. So you're always grading on a curve when you're going to play a league schedule in the SEC, but there's no Texas here. There's no Ole Miss. There's no South Carolina. There's no LSU, no A&M, no Missouri, no Auburn. They got 8 games versus Tier 4 teams or lower. And 3 of the 4 hardest games Tennessee plays, they will have a scheduling advantage. So, if anyone wants to lay a little early money over at FanDuel on a team that's got a little value baked in, Tennessee, the last thing you saw of them is them getting run out of Columbus, Ohio. And everyone will be down on Tennessee. Buddy, that is a schedule to take advantage of if you're Josh Heupel. Ole Miss has got one again. Ole Miss has got a very workable schedule. They leave home only one time. Ole Miss leaves home once before October 18th, and it's to go to Kentucky. They got Georgia State and then the trip to Kentucky. Then they got Arkansas, Tulane, LSU. Somehow Washington State comes to Ole Miss this year. Now, granted, when they do have to leave home again, it's to go to Athens, Georgia. But in the meantime, they go half the season without a road trip outside of one to Kentucky. Now, don't take that as me dismissing Kentucky, because I remember what happened last year when they came to the Grove. I understand what could happen there. But scheduling-wise, how could you set it up any better if you were Lane Kiffin? They've got a bye on November 22nd. You notice Colin's got the schedule up if you're watching on YouTube. You see down here it's got Florida, and then it's got at Mississippi State. Do you notice one of those is 11-15, and the next one is 11-29? Why is that gap there? Well, it's there because there's a bye week there. It's very strange because their bye week is the second to last week of the season, which may mean nothing if they don't go to Atlanta. However, if they do go to Atlanta, think about what kind of advantage that potentially gives Ole Miss against a team like Georgia that may be playing their 5th or 6th game in a row. If you think that doesn't matter, this past year it happened. It happened in the Big Ten. Oregon had a really, really late season bye week, and they made the conference title game. And you're just fresher. It matters. There's no way to absolutely guard against that, but it matters. Texas, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Texas has got a very workable schedule this year. The schedule makers in the SEC have shafted Oklahoma as it relates to Texas. Like the strength of schedule dynamic and disparity between one versus the other has been a joke for the first 2 years that they've been in this league. There are 4 SEC teams that we have as tier 4 or lower. Texas plays all of them this year. They go to Ohio State in week 1. That's actually what boosts the strength of schedule and makes it look tougher than it is. And I'm not knocking a trip to Ohio State. That's a really big deal. But you don't have to beat Ohio State to win this conference. They've got the easiest conference schedule in this league. They go to Florida. They go to Georgia. It's not easy. I said it's the easiest in the SEC. And you compare that to what Oklahoma's got to play or what Florida's got to play. You look at what Ole Miss is dealing with compared to what Bama's dealing with. It's like different worlds. And somehow these are all league schedules. These are all conference schedules. And sure enough, we'll get to the end of the year and someone out there will be yelling, well, you are what your record says you are. Just win your games, you know. Yeah, I do know. They're all trying to win their games. Some of them are just having a lot tougher time doing it than the others. And it's because the league schedule in the SEC makes no sense whatsoever.